Well, good morning, New Orleans. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live Dattitude podcast on this Wednesday morning, special edition Wednesday morning here as I'm about to take a little vacation. So we had to do it on Wednesday instead of Friday. I hope that's okay with everybody. Episode number 127. I'm Jim Derry along with Jeff Duncan as we get together every week. We're going to preview the Saints at Browns on Saturday, playing on Christmas Eve at noon on Fox. Dunk, what's going on this morning?
Not much, a little late start. My apologies. Scrambling around, trying to get extra coffee. I couldn't even get my second cup of coffee, so I'm not going to be quite as sharp as I need to be for this pod.
Well, everybody needs a second cup of coffee. I only had one myself. Hello, Jerry. We're going to show you first. Thank you for joining us, as we will all see. Jerry says game's on CBS. Jerry says game's on CBS. I will check that to make sure, and I'm sure he's right because when he says that, last time he corrected me, he was correct. So I'm going to take his word for it. And so ignore the graphic that it's on Fox. It's on CBS. Aspen Angel says, yay. And Jerry, also, Doug Mouton told me several weeks ago that it was going to be on CBS. When they switched the game, I just assumed it was going to be Fox. That's what you get for assuming. You know how that goes. All right, Dunk, we're going to start off this morning not talking about the Saints. Just learned like 5 minutes before I went on the air here that Franco Harris passed away at age 72. Kind of an odd time, not odd, but an interesting time for him to pass away as they're about to hold the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception, Steelers and Raiders, on Saturday night. And I actually got to meet Franco one time. I'll talk about that. But I know you grew up in an area where there probably were tons of Steelers fans.
Yeah, and that obviously is, I was really young when that happened, but it was still, to this day, one of the most iconic plays in NFL history. And I got to meet Franco Harris when the last Super Bowl we had here. He was part of some of the legend group that at one of the events I was at. He could not have been a nicer person. I mean, really, really smart guy and loved New Orleans. So really sad to hear that news today.
Interesting you say that because I got to meet him briefly before Super Bowl 36, I believe, Tom Brady's first Super Bowl, which was in New Orleans, and I was assistant sports editor back then. And I'm not going to speak ill of anyone, but he wasn't as kind to me. I'll just put it that way. But it's funny though because I grew up being the Saints were so bad you had to have a second team when I was growing up.
Yeah,
everybody had a second team growing up, and mine at the time, it's funny how I lost that because I'm actually more fond of the Steelers now than I am of my second team, which at the time was the Dallas Cowboys. So I loved Roger Staubach. And I love Tom Landry, and I love the way the Cowboys played football. And so at least the Cowboys were in the playoffs every year, won a Super Bowl here and there. But I grew out of that quickly when Jerry Jones unceremoniously fired Tom Landry. I just didn't think you fired Tom Landry. But, so back then, Dunk, as you well remember, in the 70s, even though they weren't in the same conference, the Steelers and the Cowboys were big rivals because they met often in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, those were the dominant franchises, the Raiders as well. But
Raiders, yeah,
pretty much Cowboys, Steelers, and I, as a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame selection committee, we've got a ton of those guys in the Hall of Fame. When you look at those teams, it's amazing how many all-time greats were on those Steelers teams, Franco Harris being one of them, Terry Bradshaw, obviously, from Louisiana Tech and Shreveport. They were the dominant franchises, and the Steelers to this day, I think, are still kind of they still embody the playing style, the mindset of those old Steelers teams from the 70s that kind of forged, a legacy that is endured in the league to this day. I mean, those teams, those big, huge shoulder pads and guys that wearing the neck rolls. I mean, NFL Films was made because of those Steelers and Raiders and Cowboys teams.
It's hard to believe, Dunk, and I know we're getting old, but that doesn't seem like that long ago. And watching Franco Harris play and Terry Bradshaw and Mean Joe Green and all those guys, and just to hear the 50th anniversary. I know I was a little kid 50 years ago. I was only 4 years old then, but so I don't remember the Immaculate Reception itself, but I remember all those guys playing together. And to think that that Franco Harris was 72 years old, and just crazy. I mean, to think that Franco Harris was 72 years old, so it's not like he died a young man. I mean, he probably died a little before his time. And I'm not sure. I didn't have the sound up because we're about to go in the air here, so I'm not sure what he passed away of. And I didn't know if he was sick or anything. But it just goes to show. I mean, man, we're getting old if these kind of guys are passing away.
Well, and I think let's be honest. I mean, I think when those guys played back in that time, the game took a toll on them.
Yeah,
You don't
for
see
sure.
a lot of guys living from those eras very long, unfortunately.
No doubt.
I mean, I can tell you this from doing – I did a story for the Times-Picayune on the 40-year anniversary of the 1967 Saints team, the first Saints team, right? So that would have been, 2007, I guess?
Yeah.
I did the story, and it was staggering how many of those players had passed away. And that was, a long time ago. They just did not – a lot of them died in their 50s and early 60s. Players, I think the game was so brutal back then. We didn't know as much about, sports science and medicine, and the players, it took a toll. And I see it even to this day with the great Archie Manning. I mean, Archie, he's basically struggling to get around because of different injuries he had where he had to have late surgeries in his life. And that has taken a toll on him. All those years of getting pounded on the Superdome turf, that hard AstroTurf. And I think even, not to go on a tangent here, but I think we're going to look back even on this modern turf, this modern field turf. I think eventually that's all going to go away because they're realizing that that's not even as safe as obviously natural grass.
Yeah, Dattitude here on a Wednesday morning instead of a Friday. Again, I'm going to be going on vacation for about 5 or 6 days during the Christmas break. So we are doing the show early this week. I will be off on Friday. We'll be back to our regular schedule after. We're not going to have a Monday Dattitude, but if you just join and watch the live shows, we'll be back on Friday next week before the Saints-Eagles game. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about Franco Harris, who I just found out passed away. Was it late last night, Dunk, or was it this morning? Do you know?
Yeah, I think it was late last night. The news just broke this morning.
Okay. So if you want to leave your comments or questions, as Jerry's done here, as Angel has done, you are more than welcome to, either on our YouTube or Facebook channels. If you want to leave us a note on Twitter, you're going to have to tweet at me, at Jim Derry Jr. We'll get your comments on the air here, or we should be on the air until at least 10 o'clock, maybe a couple minutes after. That's how Duncan and I usually roll. We roll until we don't have anything else to say. And that's what so we're going to get into Saints-Browns this morning. And as we do, Dunk, it's you look at all the weird things that happened last Sunday, and just the weird things that involved the NFC South. And I had a lot of people ask me, okay, so does the Saints have a chance now? And the answer is, well, of course, they are mathematically alive, but they're really not all that much better off. The only thing you could say about them winning this past Sunday and everyone else in the NFC South losing is that they're still mathematically alive, because had they not done that, they would not be. They still need Tampa Bay to lose all but one game, and they're going to need Carolina, I think, to lose another one besides the one that they play them in. So it's kind of a tough situation. So I put it this way. I said their odds improved from 1% chance to a 2% chance. So we're saying they have a chance.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's pretty bleak. I think it helped, obviously, when you saw the Bucs get out to that 17-0 lead, and then just completely implode in the second half of their game against the Bengals. I think that gave a little spark to people just because it looked really bleak when Tampa got that big lead. Carolina obviously kind of blowing one at home to Mitch Trubisky and the Steelers. So it's like no one wants to win the division, Jim. I mean, it's who's going to be left standing in this awful division. And unfortunately, the Saints, while I think they've got a chance to win at least two of these final three games, there's just so many bad teams left on the schedule. For the Bucs play the Arizona Cardinals. I think Carolina might still have a game left with the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are down to their third string quarterback. They've packed it in. Their GM's, off the field having issues. So I don't see it happening, unfortunately, for the Saints. I think more importantly, it's how do they finish the season on the field? How do they play? The playoffs are really a Hail Mary. I don't think that's going to happen. But, we saw the effort and energy that they played with against the Falcons. Now, can they carry that over to this week? That's been the issue. They've had a few games this year where they got it all together, played well. The Rams game, the Raiders game, the Seahawks game, they rise up. And then the next week, it doesn't carry over. And so that's what I'm interested to see this week.
What's more important to degenerates like me is my bet is still alive. It's mathematically, it's about as alive as the Saints' playoff hopes, but the Saints need to win more than 7.5 games, which means they need to win out. They need to beat the Browns, Eagles, and Panthers, and I am a little bit richer come January the 8th. It ain't going to happen. All right, I'm not silly.
Eagles?
Well, I mean, the good news is we don't know how hurt Jalen Hurts is. And if he doesn't play, they certainly can beat Gardner Minshew, because I didn't realize, people talk about how good a backup is, and we're going to go off tangent here for just a second, but people love Gardner Minshew, and I even heard people say maybe he could be the Saints quarterback. Then I looked up his record, and I know he played for a bad football team in the Jags, but he's 8-16 in his career. That's not good. I mean, if you can't figure out the math, that's not very good. And he got to start with a good Eagles team last year, with Jalen Hurts missed the last 2 games of the year. He played against Dallas last year and lost by like 25 points. That's not good. He's not good. So, Saints fans, I know things have been bleak at the quarterback position, but not that bleak. You don't want to bring in another guy like that when by week 6, we're talking about the Saints don't have a quarterback. So, I mean,
yeah, it's like it's basically like another Andy Dalton is what he is. So,
100%. Sure yeah, he doesn't even run. I thought he ran a little bit.
Huge upgrade, But here's the thing: the Eagles it's a very interesting scenario that's playing out here, because if the Eagles were to go into Dallas and beat Dallas this week, they clinch everything in the NFC. They clinch home field advantage, number 1 seed. They really don't have to play their starters against the Saints. So suddenly that game could open up if the Saints were to win against the Browns, which I think they definitely can. And then the Eagles were to beat the Cowboys. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, the Cowboys are almost 7-point favorites because of the –
Boy, did they lose a big one last week against
Jacksonville. And they're going to be salty, right? They're going to be salty. So I would think Dallas is a heavy favorite in that game, especially at the quarterback situation.
6-point – well, actually, it was down to 5 going into this morning.
But the point is, the Eagles are going to need to win. If they lose to the Cowboys, they need that Saints game. They have to hold off Minnesota. So, I don't think even with Gardner Minshew, I don't see the Saints winning that game. I just would be shocked. I mean, their offensive line is dominant. They can run the ball with Miles Sanders. They've got a really good defense. That's a difficult place to play. The Saints will be huge underdogs in that game.
They also need one more win to put away the Minnesota Vikings in the race for the number 1 seed, which is more important than ever last year and this year, because now when you get that number 1 seed, you're the only team in your conference that has a bye. Remember, it used to be number 1 and number 2, but not anymore. Only the number 1 seed gets a bye. So the Eagles will be playing for that. So if they lose to the Cowboys this week, they will be fighting hard next week. Look, beyond all that, let's just focus on when we get time. We can talk about because look, when the Saints are mathematically out of it, we're going to talk Saints whoever they play, but we are also going to focus a little bit on the NFL scenario, something we're probably not ready to do 100% just yet. And that leads me into Saints and Browns. Are you going to Cleveland this weekend, by the way?
No, I actually got out of it.
Good for you, crazy. My friend.
Supposed How'd to go, but not having to go now. I mean, it looks like it's going to be the coldest game in the history of the Saints franchise.
I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah. Nothing even close, really. So they'll be – I mean, we're looking at wind chill factors below 0. They've never played in a game that cold. So spending Christmas Eve, even though I love my job, and look, the one thing that did stand out was I've never been to this new Cleveland stadium. So it was kind of one I wanted to check off my list. I've been to every stadium in the league except for SoFi, the new Raiders stadium, and this Cleveland stadium. So I kind of wanted to check that off. And look, you mentioned earlier about growing up in Louisville and the Pittsburgh. Actually, I grew up being a Cleveland Browns fan.
Really?
When I came to New Orleans, I really learned to relate to Saints fans because at the time, the Saints hadn't won a Super Bowl. They'd had this passionate fan base. They'd been frustrated. And it reminded me so much of being a Browns fan. I mean, the Browns that came so close all those years, the fumble, the drive, Brian Sipes interception. The Browns have never been in the Super Bowl, ever. Not even been in it. They're one of the original franchises. And the other thing that's a parallel, JD, is they've never been able really to solve the quarterback issue in Cleveland. Reminded me so much when I first moved here before Breeze took over and changed the course of the franchise. The Saints' frustrations with finding a franchise quarterback. So right. I think they have a lot in common, the two fan bases.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Browns, and other than Brian Sipe, Bernie Kosar, I mean, I'm not sure that I can tell you a Cleveland quarterback before like years ago. I'm trying to think back. I mean, none of them stick out.
They had Otto Graham. Otto Graham was like a star.
Oh,
that was like
right. That's before my time. And so that means it's a long time ago. It's before my time. But, the Browns are similar. Browns have never been in the Super Bowl. Lions have never been in the Super Bowl. Hard to believe. Those original NFL franchise teams never been in the Super Bowl.
And the Browns were so close. That was what was so
the drive,
brutal.
The Elway drive.
Oh, my gosh. The drive. I mean, the Brian Sapp. I mean, those were just some of the most heartbreaking losses in the history of the NFL. John Elway just sticking it to them. So their fans are very passionate. That's football country. They have great support. That game's going to be, I think, a defensive slugfest. Whoever can make one big play probably on offense will probably win the game because I think it's going to be a field position battle. It's going to be so cold. But I think the Saints have a great shot. I mean, this is a team they can beat because they play a very similar style.
Here's a stat for you as we show the totals here. Spread is this was late last night. I did not check this spread this morning. The Browns were 2.5-point favorites. You got to lay 120 though to get that 2.5, which means they think it's about a field goal. It was 3 for much of the week. The look ahead line was 3. It was 3 until like late afternoon yesterday. I went 2.5 minus 120, which tells me it's probably going to go back to 3. So if you want to bet on the Browns, now is your time. It's not going to stay 2.5. I promise you. Money line on the Saints plus 130, which means if you want to bet on the Saints just to win, it's $100. You get $130 back if you win. Now, here's the interesting thing. For those of you that don't bet that often or don't bet at all, you see that total 32? What that means is the lines makers have put a number on this game. They think there'll be 32 points. That's the number you can bet on. 32 points scored in this game. If you want to bet the under, and that number is usually somewhere around 40 to 45 for a high-scoring game. It can be as high as 50 or 52, 53 in the NFL. 32 is so low, Jeff Duncan, that if it stays 32 or goes lower, there are only 10 other times in Saints history since they started keeping track of this in 1979 that they have had a total of 32 or fewer. In fact, it would be the first time since 1993 that the Saints have played in a game where the total going into the game was at 32 or fewer. If it goes to 31.5, it would be only the 6th time in Saints history that they have played with a total that low. So, and the Browns have only played in 7 games in their history, and they played a lot of snow and a lot of junk and a lot of they've often been running teams and have good defenses. So the Browns have only done it 7 times where they've had a total going into the game of 32 or fewer. So that is extremely low, and it shows you how nasty it's going to be in Cleveland on Saturday.
Well, look, and I think more important than the actual sub-zero temperatures is the wind. I mean, that stadium is right up there on Lake Erie. The winds are projected to be like sustained around 25, 30, even up to 40 miles per hour. So passing is going to be difficult. The kicking game is going to be affected. It's going to be nasty. You're right. That's the perfect word for it. But I think the Saints team is kind of built for these kind of games, defensive minded. They can, now they're going to lose Cesar Ruiz. We saw that news yesterday.
Yeah.
Finally got their offensive line back intact last week. they played very well against Atlanta. And then, of course, they lose Ruiz. We don't know what that injury was. It looks like something to his foot, but he's on IR, so he's out. So they're going to have to shift around the offensive line. We might finally see Trevor Penning. I'm interested to see what they do with that opening, if they move Penning into guard or play him at left tackle and move Hurst over to guard.
I think Hurst is more likely to move to guard, don't you think?
I would think if they do that, or they could just keep everybody intact, keep Penning in his role as the sixth offense, sixth lineman, and then move in like Calvin Throckmorton or somebody there that's got a little more experience. But it'll be interesting to see what they do. But having said all that, the Saints should be able, to be in this game, just because the Browns are, even with Deshaun Watson back, their offense has really struggled. They're obviously a very heavy run team, and the Saints still, even though I know they gave up a lot of yards last week to the Falcons, they're still a good run defense. So it'll be a test for them.
You have about 20 to 30 minutes to get in your comments or questions here on Dattitude Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube or Twitter, you can do that easily by just typing in the comments, and it shows up on our stream, and I show it on the screen. And you're more than welcome to, even if it's just a comment, you're more than welcome to say hello. If you want to do it on Twitter, at Jim Derry Jr. is where you'll find me. I'll also read that on the air. So you're saying that it is not, I have Jalen Hurts. No one cares about your fantasy team department. I have Jalen Hurts. Okay. He's carried me to the semifinals. So this is not a good week to have Jalen Hurts being hurt. And then potentially next week in the championship game or the consolation game, God forbid. But so you're saying it would not be a good week to use Andy Dalton as a replacement?
I don't think so. No, this is not a game for Andy Dalton. Not in this wind and cold. It's going to be interesting. The Saints are going up early. I think it'll be interesting to see if they try to get in a workout up in Cleveland on Friday, the day before the game. I bet they do. I know they're going to practice outdoors this week here in New Orleans to try to get, adjusted. But let's face it, no one, even the Browns, aren't going to be comfortable in that kind of weather. I mean, that's right. You get down below zero, I don't care who you are, you're not going to be comfortable. So
as Jerry points out, he's pulled up the weather forecast for us: high 12, low 5 with a 30-mile-an-hour wind and possible snow. I'm going to pass. Good move of getting out of that, by the way. I don't know how you worked that, but probably the same way I worked getting out of doing some of the home games that I was supposed to do here towards the end of the road, and I ended up getting out of that.
Well, look, our two beat writers, Taryn Walk and Luke Johnson, both are Wisconsin natives, so they should be fine. They're like penguins. They should be adaptable to this weather. I'm not. I'm a Southern boy. Taryn,
maybe because she's still super young, but you know what happens to people that I've learned, and you're one of them, okay? What I've learned is when people move to New Orleans, one of my best friends is from Chicago, born and raised in Chicago, lived there the first 22 years of his life. I've never heard anyone bitch about cold more than this guy. Okay. I mean, you grew up where right now it's going to be like 2 degrees on Sunday, and you're bitching because it's going to be 35 degrees here. I mean, yeah, but it's way colder and my body can't take it. I mean, you're probably one of the, you had days where you walked outside and went to school and it was like 15 degrees outside. I mean, you're one of those that just hates the cold, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, well, we got a wet cold down here, so it's
a wet
more
cold.
of a bone-chilling cold, very much like Chicago. I mean, when it gets in the 40s, as you know, in New Orleans, man, it's cold. It was cold last night. I was out in the quarter with some friends, and man,
you ain't seen nothing yet.
It was in the 50s, and it was cold.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So. And my sister lives in Massachusetts. She comes home. And when she comes home in the winter, and like, you just came home from like 8 inches of snow. What are you crying about?
Well, look, and the other thing I would say that these houses here, at least, I live in Uptown.
Yeah, they're different.
Shotgun, they're made to be cool for the summer.
That's right.
So, you got these thin walls, you got raised floors, high ceilings, everything's made to cool in the summer. So they're not made to stay warm.
Well, anyone who's listened to me over the past however many years knows I like to talk about the weather. I really think I should have been a meteorologist because I do talk about the weather a lot. It's just something that I do. So
what happens when you start getting old, man?
well, I did it when I was young too. So I thought I was Nash Roberts. I used to like get me a little board and draw my own. I know how to draw a hurricane symbol, because I used to practice it. I wanted to be just like Nash Roberts. Instead, I'm like Jeff Duncan. So that's what I grew up to be. I mean,
you took the wrong path, my friend.
I most certainly did. Because look, in sports betting, you have to be right at least 55% of the time, or no one with any respect pays any attention to you. In meteorology, you can be right like 25, 30% of the time. You're like, wow, that guy's Bob Rack. He knows what he's talking about. And so, I mean, I certainly took the wrong path. Let's get back to football. Saints, Browns. All right. So one of the things you said I find interesting, I'm going to put this graphic on that I like to show every week. And here's what I don't like. And I don't want to give my pick away just yet. But there is one stat against stat that absolutely jumps out to me in a cold weather game, and here's why I think the Saints are in a lot of trouble this week. You look at rushing defense for the Saints, 23rd in the NFL. They gave up 139 yards and a touchdown to some dude named Tyler Algier last week. And this week they're going up against the 5th-ranked rushing offense that I think is actually better than 5th, because Nick Chubb, I'm not sure how they're going to stop Nick Chubb. And this game might be over in 2.5 hours because it's going to be run. Let's run it and get the hell out of here.
The name of the podcast, Dattitude, that's what the Saints are going to have. I mean, it's going to be about their attitude. It's going to be cold. It's going to be miserable. And we know exactly what Cleveland's going to try to do with Nick Chubb. The Deshaun Watson has not really kind of found his groove yet in the passing game. They don't have a lot of vertical threats. So it's pretty simple, and the Saints are going to have to – and that's what Atlanta did. I mean, Atlanta couldn't really pass the ball down the field at all with Desmond Ridder.
Yeah.
They didn't try. Everybody knew what they were going to do. But, look, I also think that's a little misleading in that Falcons game because the Saints were playing for a lot of the game with a double-digit lead. So they were kind of willing to sit back in their base defense, let them run the ball. They would give up those 4 and 5 yard chunks, and they were just grinding time off the clock. Now, it almost came back to haunt them, but I think they were willing to give that up. And I couldn't believe how many first downs the Falcons got by like this much. They were getting like 4 yards, then 3, then it'd be like 3rd and 3, and they'd get 3 yards and an inch. And they were willing to kind of methodically do that. And those yards ended up adding up. But I think the Saints were fine with it because it was taking a lot of time off the clock. They weren't giving up that explosive quick strike play. So a little misleading to me, but I was actually came away. You sounded a little derogatory about Tyler Allgeier, I think it is. That guy's good. He's going to be a good player in this league.
He was a 5th-round pick out of BYU.
I'm telling you, he's going to be good.
This time last year, he was wondering probably if he would even be drafted. And he did have a good – I was joking about people don't know who he is because I actually knew who he was last year because I actually paid attention as we go into the draft, and I knew a lot about him. So I'm joking in that aspect. But he had a very good end of the season. I think he rushed for 1,300 or 1,400 yards last year at BYU and was a good back. But still.
He's not Nick Chubb, put it that way.
He's not Nick Chubb is kind of my point. And the fact that the Falcons were able to kind of do what they want on the ground when you knew that that's what they were going to do. Cordell Patterson didn't have as good of a day, but I don't know, man. It's a little worrisome to wonder what they do because we know what the Cleveland Browns game plan is. And here's another thing that worries me. And you could tell me that I'm wrong. I would love for you to tell me that I'm wrong. I always love when people tell me I'm wrong. But another matchup, rushing offense against rushing defense. Well, I mean, the Saints don't run the ball very well, but the Browns don't stop the run either. So 21st against 25th. Here's my biggest problem with that, though, Dunk. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me that I'm wrong. Alvin Kamara looks just, I'm going to be nice and say disinterested, okay? Or he looks like his mind is elsewhere. And so if his mind has been elsewhere in the 72-degree Caesars Superdome, it's about 62 up at the top in the press box, but 72 on the field in the Caesars Superdome. What's he going to do when it's 8 degrees in Cleveland? Is he going to care then?
Yeah, maybe this is where we see the Eno Benjamin signing or, come in because look, I think he played with some good energy last week, but there just wasn't anything there. I mean, I don't know what the deal is, why they can't seem to open up. He did a little better, he had a little more. That you could tell they were trying to get Alvin Kamara involved. They used him on a jet sweep. They lined him up outside. They were moving him around a lot. There was obviously a concerted effort to try and get him the ball in space, and it was marginal at best, the results. So, look, he's got to play big this week. I mean, behind him, and we saw David Johnson came in and coughed the ball up.
Oh, gosh.
Awful fumble.
That was brutal.
I mean, it wasn't even a strip. He just lost it. Benjamin, I don't know if he's ready to play yet or not. The Saints put a lot of pressure on their backs to make reads, quickly at the line of scrimmage on pass protection and things like that. I don't know if they're willing to just throw Benjamin out there yet or not, because there's just a lot on their plate.
Yeah, I think they probably will, though. I mean, what do they have to lose, really? I mean, if you're in the grand scheme of things, I mean, what could you possibly have to lose here? I think there's a good chance that he will be out there. I think everyone that runs the football is going to be used because, quite frankly, unless they're just losing and they have no other choice and losing badly, I mean, I don't think Andy Dalton's going to throw more than 15 to 18 passes.
Right. No, I think it's going to be. Look, I'm curious to see how the Browns handle this offensively. Watson has not. He's gotten a little incrementally better every week, a little more comfortable, but he's not putting up big numbers.
No,
look, they don't have a lot of great outside threats. They go to the tight end a lot, but I would think, just looking at it objectively, they would have a little better chance to pass the ball. They're probably a little more used to it than the Saints do. Even though I know Andy Dalton played in Cincinnati, he's played in Chicago. I would think that the Browns, practicing up there every day in Berea, are going to be able to pass the ball a little bit better. So I think that this game favors the Browns. I think the line's probably spot on.
You can't prepare, like you said earlier. You just can't prepare for this. I mean, no one can. I don't care. Maybe Aaron Rodgers a little bit. Maybe Josh Allen. He seems to thrive in it a little bit. And to some extent, like a Justin Fields, because it doesn't matter what the weather is because he just runs the ball all around. Maybe those three guys, and to some extent Tom Brady, because he did throughout his career, he's seen just about everything. But it is hard to prepare for something like this. Something you talk about, it's never happened in the history of the Saints franchise. Look, I know they play in the dome, but you go on the road, and I remember some cold games. They played in Pittsburgh one year to clinch the division or clinch a winning season for the first time in team history. It was super cold that game. I remember there were some other games where they played in snow games. Doesn't happen a whole lot, but to say that it's the first time it's ever happened in a 55-year history of a franchise is saying something. So I just don't think anybody can be prepared what they're going to go out and face on Saturday in the elements of Cleveland, Ohio.
And look, I don't think either team really. I mean, the Browns are kind of in a similar boat playoff-wise. I don't think they've been officially eliminated, but they're pretty much
they're
like
out.
The Saints. Yeah, they're pretty much like the Saints. So, you're not facing a team that has to have the game, but this game is going to come down to simple, I think, want to. Use the old Les Miles line. What's your want to? Because you're going to have to really be motivated to play in these conditions. And that's why I think it'll be interesting to see how the Saints come out, because they definitely were motivated against Atlanta last week. They played very inspired football. They almost gave it away. Luke Johnson wrote a very good story about some of the problems that we've seen chronically with this team this year of getting a lead and then just kind of starting to lose focus and making mistakes, not putting the opponent away, and almost came back to haunt them again on Sunday. We saw games like this twice against the Bucs, also against the Bengals, where the Saints had leads and couldn't hold off the opponent. And, look, if they don't poke that ball out right there, it didn't look
They're not going to win. Yeah, if they don't poke the ball out at the bare minimum, it's going to overtime, because Younghoe Koo's not going to miss a 40-something yard field goal. I mean, even if they don't poke the ball out there and then they go 3 and out from there, Younghoe Koo is going to make that field goal. It's going to go into overtime, and I don't think the Saints are going to win in overtime. So the Saints probably don't win. So another case of the opposite of Sean Payton, not finishing strong. I know there are some people that don't want to hear Sean Payton's name anymore and don't want to compare Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen hates being compared to Sean Payton, I'm sure, but too bad. That the legacy of this franchise. I mean, we realize how much you miss whether Dennis Allen he just happens to be the guy that follows Sean Payton. And I know no one is going to be that. But one characteristic that Saints teams had under Payton was finishing strong. And this team has had chances to win other games. If you think about, and you can play, people don't want to play the what if game, but some people can't help think about it. You think about how this season would be different right now had 10 minutes of a game going differently in Tampa Bay. If they win that game, and I mean, their odds of making the playoff go from like 2% to probably like 60 to 65%, because they are now the overwhelming favorites to win this division. Because not only would they be 6 and 7? Oh, they would be right now 6 and 8, I guess. But Tampa Bay would only have 5 wins, and they'd have the tiebreaker over them. So the Saints would be in position that Tampa Bay's in right now had they just held on and won that damn game. And the fact that they can't finish is a major problem.
Well, to me, where I see a difference, and again, I'm obviously going to bring up Sean Payton because that's
you can't help it.
Yeah, it's the standard that we've all seen here for the last decade and a half. The difference I see is that the standard that he holds the team to.
That's right.
I think they're now up to 24 false start penalties.
Yeah,
there's no way Sean Payton would allow that to happen. Players would have a lot more focus. They would, I think, have a lot more fear about, sometimes, instilling fear in people is not a bad thing. And I think Sean Payton, his attention to detail and what he forced his staff, how he forced them to hold a high standard and set the bar. We're just not seeing it on a day in, day out basis or a game in, game out basis with this team. And those little things, the false starts, and all of a sudden, what was it the other day? They had a second and an inch and they ended up 4th and 17. That's just awful football. And it's the stuff that's haunted this team all year. And I think it's not just a reflection on the coaching staff, but also a reflection on the leaders on this team that have let this coaching staff down because they're not setting the standard on the field.
And I don't know, again, I've said this 100 times. I don't know how that changes with Dennis Allen in charge. And I'm not rooting for, again, I've also said this, I'm not rooting for anybody to be fired. I've been fired over the last 11 years 3 times, and I'm like a cockroach. I keep coming back. They keep bringing me back. So I know what it's like to not have a job. And I get it's different from Dennis Allen, who probably has enough money to live the rest of his life. But it's no fun whether you have money or don't have money to be fired. So I don't root for anyone to be fired. But, man, I just don't know how that mentality that you just talked about, I don't know how that changes with Dennis Allen in charge. But we're going to find out because I'm with you. I'd be shocked if he's fired. I think there will be major changes to this coaching staff. I think Pete Carmichael is probably going to resign. I don't think he wanted that job in the first place. And I think there'll be other changes, especially on offense. But Dennis Allen's not going anywhere unless something crazy happens. And again, stop putting the Sean Payton maybe coming back. He might come back to coaching, but he's not coming back to New Orleans. He knows what he left in the first place. Bill Leota says the Saints should have been at least a 10-game winner this season on paper. Dennis Allen and his coaching staff are clearly to blame. He needs to go. I mean, again, he's not going anywhere, Dunk. I'm almost certain you're in agree with me that he will be the coach next September on the sideline.
I mean, I think it's in all likelihood. I don't think it's beyond the possibility. I mean, if this thing bottomed out, they lost their last 3 games. I mean, I think there's a possibility they could move on. But the only way I see they move on from Dennis Allen is if they know they can get Sean Payton back. I think it's strictly that scenario. That's the only scenario I see them moving on from DA is if somehow through back channels they have heard that Sean Payton would come back to New Orleans, which I've already written he would. But it's a matter of would they do it to Dennis Allen. I don't think if they finish with 2 wins, even maybe 1 win here, 2 of their final 4, I think that's enough for them to keep him on board. I think the other thing that's people aren't realizing is there's a league-wide kind of push. I don't know if you saw that story where the league sent out a memo to every team in the league with a number. I can't remember what it was. It was hundreds of millions of dollars that the league teams members have paid to fired coaches that now are not even coaching anywhere. There's just hundreds of millions of dollars going to these coaches that already moved on from. So I think that internal pressure as well from the league to not be rash with coaching decisions may play a factor as well.
Here's the thing, though, and this is going to sound the wrong way, and I'm sorry that it's going to sound the wrong way, but it's the truth. Sean Payton doesn't give a rat's ass about what happens to Dennis Allen after. I mean, if he really wants to come back and coach the Saints, and the Saints really want him, he's going to come back. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm just
look. I think he's going to. The way I've tried to tell people is he would consider it. So there's a difference.
Right. It'll be whether he wants to or not. It won't be what it does to Dennis Allen is my point.
Right. But what I mean is he would consider it along with whatever other options. He's going to see what other options are out there. So it's not as cut and dried as, hey, if we move on from DA, will you come? Which is what, if I'm Mickey Loomis and Gail Benson, that's the answer I want to know.
Oh, if I'm Mickey Loomis and Gail Benson, I've already asked that question. So
right.
they know at least whether he's even semi-interested.
Well,
they already know that.
He definitely is open to it. I know that. So
okay, well,
but again, let me just finish.
But
what if the Los Angeles Rams job opens? That's a big job with big money. So I'm just saying, it's not. So I think that's the biggest problem is, even if he's considering it, the Saints have to know you're in. They have to know you would come here, not you might come here, because they can't move on from Dennis Allen and not get Sean Payton. That's the crux of this dilemma.
The Saints have something going in their favor, I think, as far as Sean Payton coming back, and something strongly going against them. What they have in their favor, I think, is there aren't going to be a lot of jobs that I think Payton would be willing to take, and or maybe not jobs that are willing to pay what it's going to take to get him. So I've heard a lot of talk about the Los Angeles Chargers, and it would be a great fit for him. And Justin Herbert would be a great quarterback for him to go mentor. The problem with the Chargers is the Chargers are notoriously cheap. They're not going to spend what it takes to get a Sean Payton, and I'm not 100% sure that they're going to even be willing to get out of the contract they have with Brandon Staley that I think runs for 3 more years. So I'm not sure they're going to be willing to spend that kind of money.
They're also probably going to end up about 11-6. I mean, you look at I think their final 3 games are the Cardinals, the Colts.
They're going to lose this week. They're going to lose to the Colts this week.
Cardinals, Colts, and Broncos. Maybe the three of the 5 worst teams in the league, I would say. They're at least 2 of the 5. So,
I agree, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lost 2 of those 3. And then what do you do?
I don't think so. I think if they were going to lose, they were going to lose to the Titans last week. And I think
they're going to lose to the Colts this week in Indianapolis, Monday night game. We'll see.
Well, they might, but they're still going to make the playoffs, even if they win 2 of their 3.
Probably. They probably will. But the thing is, I mean, there's been all this talk, and so I scratched them off the list. Is my point. I think that the only 2 places that he would even think about going that or have the potential to be open are both in the NFC West. And Arizona with Kyler Murray, and now Kyler Murray might not play until the middle of next year. Cliff Kingsbury, though, he's another guy who has 3 years left on his contract. I think he just re-upped. So really, that brings me to the Rams. And I don't think Sean McVay wants to coach anymore. He talked about retiring before the season started. But does Sean Payton want to go to a team that has Matthew Stafford, who's starting to age? It's not like they have some young quarterback he can go mentor there. So that's going to be.
Yeah, but I don't think that. I think people are doing too much over analysis there. I mean, Sean Payton is the most important thing he's going to look at is the franchise's functionality.
Yeah.
The functionality of ownership, the deep pockets.
Right.
He's going to look at the big picture of can you win. He isn't going to look at the short term, which is, do they have a quarterback right now? Do they, what's their cap situation? He'll fix all that. He's a confident guy. He came to New Orleans when the whole city was underwater. They had no quarterback, and he was confident enough to come in here and do it. Now, he's not going to go somewhere where there's not that strong ownership, strong management. That's for sure. He's going to stay put on the sidelines and continue to do TV. He's happy doing what he's doing. He doesn't need the money. But I think if like the Rams with Stan Kroenke, who's one of the richest people in the world, you got a major league stadium out there. There's a lot of things why I think he'd consider the Rams over the Chargers. You make a good point about ownership there. The Cardinals are the worst situation in my opinion.
No one wants to coach. No one.
I don't think there's any way he goes to Arizona. Anyway.
I agree.
So I think it's going to be somewhere like the Rams. That's a big, strong. Like the Broncos would be interesting to me because they do have new ownership, but they've got a kind of an iffy situation right now with Russell Wilson tied into that major contract. But they're probably willing to make a move on Nathaniel Hackett. And then you've also got David Tepper in Carolina, who I guarantee you has put out feelers to Sean Payton and his representation. But would Mickey Loomis allow Sean Payton to go in the division? No way. So that's not going to be a possibility.
And I would not be surprised at all if Pete Carroll, I think at age 72, decides that that's the end of the line for him. I mean, Seattle, they had a great start. They're not going to the playoffs. I mean, they're just not going to the playoffs. I mean, so they're going to choke away what was a great start. Excuse me, Geno Smith turned back into Geno Smith. I think it's this. I think it's Rams, Saints, or nothing. I think it's Rams, Saints, or he spends another year on the sideline. And I think if I had to pick one, I think he spends another year on the sideline.
I do too. I think more than likely he doesn't coach anywhere. I think I know he wants to coach somewhere, but I would be surprised if he takes a bad job.
Yeah, I think it's going to be I know people joke about this, but Dallas is one choke job away from losing its coach. Jerry Jones, who knows when he could pull the plug on Mike McCarthy. He knows what he's going to do. Yeah,
I mean, 100%. I think it's a big game for Mike McCarthy this week. I mean,
I agree 1,000%.
They need to beat the Eagles and show that last week was a fluke.
Okay, Dattitude Podcast, Jim Derry, Jeff Duncan here on a Wednesday morning instead of a Friday. We're going to be on for about another, I'd say, 7-8 minutes because we're going to come back to the Saints. We're going to give our predictions. If you want to give your prediction, you can do that in the comment stream. We will show it on the air and talk about it. I want to spend 3 minutes, Dunk, 3 minutes. And again, after the Saints are done, we're going to spend a lot more time on the Pelicans. I know a lot of people want to hear about the Pelicans. We're just going to spend 3 minutes, and then we're going to come back to the Saints for our final predictions. But you talk about the Pels. It's been a rough stretch for them. They win 7 in a row, and now they've lost 4 in a row. A couple of them in heartbreaking fashion. They're showing, to me, this little stretch shows they're right on the precipice of being one of those great teams, but they heard on TV who's the best team in the West now. We know how much this changes this time of year. Oh, the Pelicans are the best team in the West, and then they go lose 4 in a row. Got to get out of that. I think they just need to turn off the TVs and turn off the radios and turn off people like me and you and go back to playing the basketball they were playing.
Yeah, the disappointing the last 4 games for sure. I think you're exactly right. Kind of had their heads in the cloud a little bit and paid the price for it. And they played some good teams, but to me, the glaring deficiency right now is on the defensive end. That's just an area they've got to improve in. I think Willie Green's got to improve in it. I mean, they've got to be better on that end of the floor. They've had a number of games where one guy has just gone off on them. And you've got to get the ball out of that guy's hands, whether it's Jordan Clarkson or Lauri Markkanen or I think Devin Booker lit him up for 40,
56.
50 points.
It was like 56.
Yeah, it's a crazy number. And so the other night, obviously Giannis did, but I mean they have this tendency to let one player go off, and you see good teams around the NBA, they get that ball out of that guy's hands and have an ability defensively, put up a wall against Giannis. We didn't see a wall at all the other night. That's how everybody in the league plays Milwaukee. So they've got some room to grow, both in the staff and on the court, and they've got to get Brandon Ingram back. I don't know what is going on. This toe injury or whatever he has lingered far too long. I'm sorry.
He's been hanging out with Michael Thomas.
It's brutal. I think he's missed now 11 games with a sprained toe.
We've talked about this before. It's the same medical staff. You can take it for whatever it's worth. It's
I don't think it's the medical staff. I think it's the player. I'm sorry.
I don't disagree with you.
You know,
but it's the same. It's the same group of people who are allowing these sorts of injuries to just linger on and do whatever. But back to your point about defense, Dunk, those numbers on the screen prove your point. Bucks 128 points, Suns 118 points, Jazz, I know went in overtime, but 132 points. You can't be allowing those kinds of numbers and expect to win big basketball games. Now, look, they're going to probably skew things this week because they play the Spurs, the Thunder, and the Pacers. And you look at those records. Not only do none of them have a winning record, but two of them have awful records. The Spurs are 10-20, the Thunder are 13-18. I mean, that's just flat out terrible. So don't get too excited about what's coming up. They've got to find a way to fix that defense, and to me, almost fix it quick, because after the calendar turns, it starts getting real.
Yeah, look, they got to get these next 2 to 3 games for sure, and then they're fine. They'll be in good shape. Probably get Ingram back, but I think this team's still got to move in them somewhere around the trade deadline.
Yeah, I agree.
To fix the roster a little bit, but they should be better defensively. They've got guys like Herb Jones and Valanciunas. I mean, they've got guys that should be better defensively than what they're showing. Their team defense is where it's lacking, and that goes back a little bit to the basketball IQ and the maturation of this group as a unit, and the fact that you constantly have a guy out like Ingram. It's just hard for them to build a cohesion on the defensive end of the court when you're missing key players like that.
Yeah, unlike their brothers, the New Orleans Saints, they have plenty of maneuvering that they can do. They have draft picks out the wazoo. They have space financially to be able to make moves. They will make a move. This team is going to make a move some kind of way. Now, they may end up losing a player that you really like in the process, but they are going to make a move. It will be interesting to see as we go down the stretch. All right, I know we have been on long enough, 53 minutes as I look at the clock there. So I want to get back, and it is prediction time. Jeff Duncan, Saints at Browns. And if you just joined us, or you like the groundhog and you just popped your head out somewhere to see, oh, it's not that cold, then maybe it'll be fine in Cleveland. You are wrong. It is going to be frigid, downright frigid in Cleveland on Saturday, Christmas Eve. I'm sure everybody – I said this on my podcast the other day, Dunk. Can you imagine if you were a Saints fan that said you were trying to pick somewhere to go? I don't have a big family. We'll go to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, have some fun in Cleveland on Christmas Eve. It'll be fun. It might be a little chilly in the 30s or something. Maybe we'll see some snow. And then you find out it's going to be like 6 degrees. Can you imagine if you plan that back in August or September?
Yeah, that's one I would not have booked. I mean, I'd probably spend my whole day in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame instead of going to the game. I've always wanted to do that. That is a little bit of a downer for me not getting to go there. But as far as predictions, JD, this is a game, man, I don't have a good feel for at all.
I do. You go ahead.
I nailed last week's game. I thought the Saints would win, but I thought Atlanta would cover, and I was accurate on that. This game, I mean, I think the Saints could easily win it. I think the Browns could easily win it. I don't have a good feel because I just think these conditions are going to make it so difficult that one play could turn this game. If somebody gets a 10-point lead in this game, I think it's going to be hard to come back from, considering the wind and the conditions that are going to make passing difficult. So I do like, and I'm a big believer in this. Maybe I might put too much emphasis on this when I do analysis, but I do like the Saints catching the Browns after a big win. I'm big on that kind of thing in the NFL. You get a team they're at home, the holidays, they might be a little distracted. And the Saints, I know, have not been the most consistent team, but I think they'll give great effort in this game. So I think if I had to make a pick, I would take the Saints, maybe even outright to win the game. But that 32 total, I think, is going to be pretty accurate. I can't see it being a game in the
I think it's going under.
Yeah, it could be. A lot of field goals, which doesn't make me feel great about Will Lutz.
It'd be hard to kick a field goal in 30-degree weather, a 30-mile-an-hour weather.
The Browns kicker, of course, is Cade York from LSU. So He's an excellent kicker, but I do think it's going to be a field position game. This is a game that Dennis Allen's very comfortable coaching in. This is his kind of game. He's not the kind of guy you want to get in a shootout with, but in a game like this, he knows how to play field position. He knows how to punt on 4th and 1. So I think the Saints have a great shot of winning this game, but I think we're going to, again, we say this every week, but you're going to be able to tell early on the Saints' body language, their energy and enthusiasm. We saw it last week. Now let's see if it carries over.
Well, there's no Mike Bell, so everybody should have the right cleats on, right,
Good
Jeff?
point.
So we'll see what happens.
All
right.
And they used to remember spray paint the grass up in Cleveland because it was always brown.
Right.
See if they do that.
I've not seen what uniforms they're wearing yet. So I looked yesterday and they weren't on there yet. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. All right. I, unlike Jeff Duncan, do have a good feel for this game, and you're probably not going to like it. For the first time this season, a game involving the New Orleans Saints is in my NFL best bets of the week in my NFL picks column, which you can see this morning on bet.NOLA.com. We've had an interesting stretch where I've either done really well with my best bets and not as good with the rest of my picks, or really poorly with my best bets and really good with the rest of my picks. So trying to get out of that, trying to get them all right. Of course, you don't want me to be right here because I don't think this is a good matchup for the Saints at all. I would not only would I lay the 2.5 if you want to bet on it, I think the Browns are going to win this game by double digits. I just don't think this is and here's the thing that sticks out. We talked about it. Russian defense, 23rd against 5th. Nick Chubb is going to have himself a day. I don't think there's going to be 30 passes, period, in this game. I'm talking about total, Dunk. I don't think there's going to be 30 total passes in this game. As we see, Jerry says he thinks it's going to be 17-10 Saints. I think that's the right ballpark. I predicted 16-6 in my column, and that's with 2 missed extra points. I think Cade York is going to kick a field goal, but he's going to miss an extra point. I think Will Lutz is going to miss an extra point. It is going to, because I do think the Saints will score. I think they'll be in it until the end, but I think Nick Chubb is going to wear this defense out. I like the under, but I just don't know. And whenever it comes down to, I talked about Alvin Kamara being disinterested. I don't see how he's going to be interested in 6 degrees. So will Taysom Hill be able to do anything? Are they even going to try to do anything with him? Because one week they use him a lot, and they used him a lot last week. The next week they don't use him at all. I just don't know. I don't.
Got to be a big Taysom Hill game. This game's made for Taysom Hill. I
couldn't agree more, and I don't think they will. I think they'll try to outthink themselves. Hennessy says he hopes this is the game the Saints learn that Dennis Allen is not the right coach for us. Well, if they haven't learned that by now, I mean, do you really need game number 15 of the season? I mean, I don't think it's going to change anybody's opinion. And I agree with Jeff Duncan. The coach of the Saints next year, I think there's a 90% chance it's Dennis Allen, and there's a 9% chance it's Sean Payton, and a 1% chance it's someone else. So how do you think about those percentages? Though?
Yeah, I would say that's right. Maybe even a little higher for Payton. I mean, it's all going to come down to these last. Look, if they get beat double digits Saturday, I think that door opens a lot further. And he doesn't finish well with Allen.
I will say this as well, and Dunk kind of alluded to it earlier before we go off the air. If you have any hopes at all that the Saints win the rest of their games and you get over 7.5, like I do, or you are harboring any inkling that the Saints have a chance to make the playoffs, not only are you rooting for the Saints to beat the Browns on Saturday, but you're also a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan. You want the Eagles to put this thing away, and so they don't have to think about using Jalen Hurts. They've got some other starters that are like really close to needing to sit out, much less. So if they get a chance to sit these guys for 2 weeks, like the Saints did back in 2009 when they won the Super Bowl and lost their last 3 games. But if they get a chance to put this thing away and clinch that number 1 seed, they're not going to play anybody next week. I promise you. So
yeah, people have been talking on social media about the Saints, that first round pick and the Eagles going to win. That's going to be so low on the priority scale.
Exactly.
We're talking about the difference of maybe being the 8th pick and the 12th pick or something like that. That's not going to factor into the
No
equation.
one's thinking about
when
that.
you have a chance to win a Super Bowl right now, you want your
100%.
players to be healthy. So I agree 100%. If the Eagles wrap it up, even if they start most of the regulars against the Saints, anybody with any type of health issue is going to sit or not play very much at all. So that game suddenly opens up a little bit if the Eagles win against the Cowboys, and the Saints have to win, obviously.
Well, Dunk, there's proof that no one really thinks about that at the end of the season. I mean, there are some teams there are some owners that probably care about that, but for the most part, 80% of them don't.
Yeah.
And proof last year is, you remember the Jaguars, the Jets, and I think the Texans were all fighting for the number one pick in the draft last year, and two of them won. I don't even remember what two that there were, but two of them won like the second to last week of the season. And so it's just proof that they don't care about that. They want to win. And like Herm Edwards says, you play to win the game. They do. None of these players are going to go out there and try to lose on purpose. As much as I've been on the Saints' ass all year long, they're not going out there to lose on purpose.
Yeah, and the difference between who you draft with the 8th pick and the 12th pick, I mean,
exactly.
It's really arbitrary. It's not 100%. Significant enough to risk an injury to a guy when you've got a real chance to win a Super Bowl. That is what the Eagles are going to be prioritizing, not this draft pick they might get.
Exactly. And are they like trying to move up as much as they can and try to have a shot at Bryce Young? They don't need Bryce Young. They don't need a quarterback.
It's not a year where they need to worry about that.
Exactly. So I agree wholeheartedly. They don't care. They would much rather win a Super Bowl this year, and they're going to worry about the health of their players. And that's why I think all this facade of Jalen, yesterday you saw on Sirianni talking about Jalen Hurts, the toughest dude he knows, and he might even play this week. He ain't playing this week. Okay, if he plays this week, they're dumb. The Eagles are super dumb if they even take a chance. You're talking about a shoulder for a running quarterback. I mean, it's a passing shoulder. Jalen Hurts is not playing this week, and he's not playing next week either. And so, I mean, I don't think he's going to play again in the rest of the regular season. So get ready for the Gardner Minshew.
They basically just need one win to wrap this thing up. So they got to win one of these final games. And
exactly.
If I were them, I'd do like the NBA approach. NBA coaches, when they have these back-to-backs, they determine which game they want to win.
Right.
And then they rest the starters the other game. I think if I'm them, just throw this game to the Cowboys. It's meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And then come back and beat the Saints the next week at home and wrap everything up. Then you could rest everybody. The final week, you'd have 2 weeks of rest to get ready for the playoffs. That's the course I'd take.
Yeah, and they already know they can beat the Cowboys. They beat them earlier in the season. So, who cares if you play them in the playoffs? Because you might. They'll worry about that then. All right, Dunk, it is about that time. You are not going to Cleveland, so you're going to have Christmas in New Orleans. What are your Christmas plans?
Well, Christmas Eve, I'll be traditionally in our group. We have a big table at Clancy's. I know that might shock you.
It does. It shocks the hell out of me.
So I spend it with a group of friends. We have a great time. It's always a tradition there. And then, look, I'll be working, unfortunately, for most of Christmas Eve on obviously the Saints game, watching that and writing. And then the next day I'll be working again on Christmas Day. So it's pretty sad Christmas for me because I have a lot of work to do this weekend.
Well, I'll throw an open invitation. If you want to drive to the North Shore, we're going to have a big dinner on Christmas. And I think the family's spread out. So it's going to be a quiet one at the Derry house on Christmas Day. If you have nothing to do, you're more than welcome to have dinner up here. And look, I'm going to a Pelicans game. I'm excited about it. First one, I get to go as a fan. So I'm going to enjoy that next Wednesday. I think they're playing the Timberwolves. So anybody run into me at the Pels game next Wednesday, come say hello. And maybe I'll give you a shout out on the Dattitude podcast. Meanwhile, we hope all of you have a just wonderful Christmas, no matter what happens with Saints Browns. It really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's about family. It's about friends. It's about people you love. And we hope you get to spend time with people you love this Christmas. We know it's going to be cold, so bundle up. And, the closer you are to someone, the warmer it is. When you're married as long as I am, as I've been, you just have to bundle up because you don't get a chance to do that all that much. That's a whole nother story. Nobody wants to hear about that. All right, we're gonna run. Merry Christmas, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Dunk, Merry Christmas to you, and we'll talk to you a week from Friday.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, JD. Everyone out there, Merry Christmas. See you on the other side.
And lastly, you can get this Dattitude podcast. We will have Uncle Big Nick coming on after this on the taped portion of the Dattitude podcast. Find it wherever you find your podcast. We'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the weekend.